Te rai a te mātauranga te pākaru mai nei, he uru matua, he uru tawhito ki ene pūkenga ki ene wānanga, kia ake ai te toinga nuku te toinga rangi ki te wai o tua ki te wai wakaika. Ko te wai ki ene tau ira, he wai tapu, he wai nui, he wai oroi. Ka pipi, ka wai, ka pōru, tika mānunu, ki te moko pūtaurarangi, he ariki he tupua. Ka puta ki te whai ao, puta ki te ao, mārama, tūturu haka maua kia tīna, hui e, tai ki e. Tēnā koutou katoa. Tēnā koutou katoa, kua tai mai ki tēnei kaupapa. Welcome everyone along to this kaupapa, this webinar that we have for you tonight in regards to our SGM that is starting up and our LVR. Now, if you don't know me, my name is Te Arapa Morehu, no rākei tēnei, he uri o tūperiri. To my side here, I would like to introduce two of our elected reps, Ngāti Mū Blair and Precious Clark, and also the CEO of Ngāti Pātua Rākei Trust, Jamie Sinclair. E mihi ana ki a koutou, tēnā koutou. During tonight's webinar, if you do have any burning questions in particular, then please type them out in the comments section. We have our General Counsel answering the questions, Natasha Strong. If there are any pātai that she is unable to answer, then we're going to ensure that we're going to keep that in the parking lot so that we can have that ready for you for the next webinar. Kia ū mai, and let's get on with tonight's kaupapa. Me ko ke tātou. Ka pai. The SGM will start on June the 20th at Ōrākei Marae this year. No mai haere mai ki tēnei kaupapa o ki tērā kaupapa. Last year we held our first SGM and it was held online. Thank you to all our whānau, ka mihi ake ki a koutou, they joined us for that particular occasion. Now, this year, whānau, we want to revisit the loan to value ratio, also known as LVR. So, ka huri au ki a koe Precious, me tēnei pātai, what is LVR?
Tēnā koe Aripa, tēnā koutou te whānau. So LVR stands for loan to value ratio, and it's essentially how much you can loan or borrow against the value of your asset. So if we break that down a little bit, if you were an individual and you wanted to buy a house and the house costed $100, you could go to the bank and the bank would require you to stump up with 20% or $20 of that $100 to purchase it, and the bank would loan you $80 or 80% to make up that $100 to purchase a house. So in that scenario, the LVR or loan to value ratio is 80%. Through our trust deed, we have a self-imposed loan to value ratio of 30%. So what that means is if the tribe wanted to buy a house that costed $100, we would go to the bank and we would have to stump up with 70% or $70, and the banks would only lend us 30% or $30 to buy that $100 asset. So you can see from those two scenarios that there's quite different loan to value ratios. With us, we have a self-imposed 30% cap, whereas if you're an individual and you went to the bank, then you could loan up to 80%. But LVRs are really important mechanisms to have, because they help you manage your risk. So when we were deciding and considering the idea of lifting the LVR from 30% to 40%, we undertook an independent review, and we had really astute business people support us with that to determine if the lift from 30% to 40% was reasonable, to assess how risky it was, and to assess if we were on par with other organisations that are like us involved in the type of business that we are in. And their independent review determined that it was reasonable, and moving from 30% to 40% would put us on par with other organisations like ourselves.
Kia ora, Precious. I do want to dig a little bit on the kupu debt. And I suppose two questions. The first question, a really short explanation, and ka huri ki a koe, Jamie, turning to you. The first question is, what's a simple explanation of what debt is? And then the next question that comes down is, many individuals out there are pushing to be debt-free when we're thinking about mortgages and examples such as that. Why do businesses feel comfortable with debt?
And kia ora te whānau. It's a very good pātai, and we do have had this several times on our road trips and talking to whānau about debt. And I understand that. I understand the natural hesitancy towards having debt because we do, there is a natural tendency to want to be debt free. And if I look at myself, I'm in a fortunate position. I've got a house in Auckland, but I could not have acquired that without taking on debt. Whilst what that has enabled me to do is to create an asset, a long-term asset for my whānau and my family's future. So it's about long-term value creation. It's about accelerating the ability for us to do more, to leverage more. And that is exactly what we're trying to do as Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei. We have a purpose to protect and grow the assets for the benefit of all members of Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei over the very long term. So it's a very long-term view. We wouldn't be doing justice to our role. We wouldn't be fulfilling our purpose if we didn't safely and appropriately use debt to complete that mission, to safely grow the value of our assets. We can do more by leveraging other people's money, and we should do that in an appropriate way. And that is what that is why we have debt. It is because of that purpose, to make a long-term investment for the benefit of all people. Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei. So I hope that answers your part on.
Do you have any?
Yeah, if I can jump in there. So in 1991, we had our first settlement, and that settlement we received $3 million in compensation. From my recollection, $1 million of that was gifted to our whānau throughout the kaipara. So we had $2 million to build our nest egg, and over that period of time we've grown to be a $1.3 billion whānau business. And if we weren't leveraging other people's money to help us create wealth, we wouldn't have got there as quickly as we did. So for me, that I'm relatively comfortable in with debt, because it's about accessing funds to create more funds that we can then distribute into really cool programs for our whānau.
So I suppose one of the big parts that comes out is, why do we want to lift the LBI and kauri atu ki a koinga?
Yeah, the main reason is what Jamie said. It's really to grow the asset base. And I'm just thinking going back to history as well, around 96, the 91 settlement, and then 96 we took on $4 million debt, which bought 50 of the homes on Kupe Street. We had another 50 transferred to us as well as part of a treaty settlement. So just thinking about that, without that $4 million debt back in the mid-90s, we wouldn't be able to provide direct housing to whānau on Kupe Street. So really, it's about being able to do more. So we have a very ambitious program, and we're ambitious because of who we are. Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei, we're the descendants of Tupuriri, and we are in this great city that Te Kawo and others built. And whānau have, rightly so, a high expectation on themselves and on us as the leadership group to deliver more, around our culture, around our reo reacquisition, around housing. Housing is continues, and rightly so, to be a significant issue for Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei as it is for the rest of Aotearoa. And we also, to keep the more cash coming in, we've got to spend money up front, and so that is, to build more houses on Uneroa over on the North Shore, and soon to be at a Unitec when that development is ready. We're going to have to invest cash into those as well. So a few years later, that $1 we put in, we'll be taking out a $1.20 or $1.30 of every dollar we put in. So that's why we need to do it, and we want to deliver more, basically. And we consulted whānau over the last 3 or 4 years over the strategic vision and the priorities, and got some amazing feedback. And it's our strategic plan, it's our vision, and we want to deliver on it. Probably the other thing I'll point out too is that you know, we are talking big numbers. You know, we've ticked over $1.2 billion in assets, and you know, and we get reminded of that by Whānau. We get reminded by that by other iwi, etc. And so these numbers are big and scary, and that's got to be acknowledged. But you know, we do have $1.2 million in assets. We do have 220 million in debt currently. You know, we spent 110 million to buy the North Shore, which is 27 hectares over there that we wouldn't have had if we didn't take on debt. But we're also got just ticked over $1 billion in equity. That's a big number. You know, so that's the difference between our total asset base versus what we owe. So we're about $1 billion. So that makes this decision for us as leaders a little bit easier because we have so much equity, and because our assets that we've managed to acquire over the last 30, 40 years through successive great decisions from boards, we've got some great assets. North Shore, 27 hectares, 20 hectares here in the CBD, most valuable real estate. Unitech, we have already have 5 hectares out there. We're about to acquire another 9 through a treaty settlement. So those are big chunks of really well-placed land, which just helps not clear the risk. There's always risk, but it helps make the decision around risk management a bit easier.
Just to add to that, so Ngāti, we mentioned that as leaders we have a relative level of comfort here. I think also bearing in mind that COVID shook the world and a number of organisations have collapsed as a result of it. However, our assets and our prudent management of our assets was really strong. And so in a catastrophe as significant as COVID, we've sailed through, and that gives me another level of confidence around increasing the LVR, because at the worst possible time, we didn't crumble.
Yeah, if I could reflect on that, I mean, we're sitting in the boardroom over there, and we were, our property experts around our board table, yeah. Whānau were predicting 20%. As much of a 20% drop in our value, which was a big hit. So we had to turn a few projects down or off, like up at Eastcliff. And in the end, I think we ended up with a 5% increase in our value. So, and that reflects, you know, that we were an asset class which was over the last 180 odd years, 181 years since the Kawa gave the land, has been a pretty sure bet. Thankfully, we weren't in other asset classes around equities and tourism. We were pretty close to going big into tourism and hotels. Yes. You know, so that was more by luck in the end that we did. Well, you know, some skill. There's a lot of stuff in the tourism market being flogged around, which was overpriced, which we didn't buy, but you know, luckily we did it.
E ka roa atu ki etahi e te atu iwi, ka whai tēnā ara, tourism. Moving on to the next question, and this is probably one of the biggest questions that has come up from over the last little bit, which is around why are we revisiting the LVR? So if we think about the Kopa's LVR, why are we revisiting it if we've already been through it in the last issue?
Yeah, this is an important question to answer, and it's certainly a question that I've personally been asked. And I guess in response to that, the board considered this really carefully. Excuse me. And there are a couple of tohu that we were reading to help us make this decision. And one of those tohu is that we put this forward as a resolution in the AGM last year alongside 6 other really complex resolutions. And we realised that given the lift in LVR is such a complex kaupapa for us all to get our heads around, that actually having more time to think about it and to discuss it was really important. We also recognised that it was really close last time in a COVID environment when there is so much uncertainty and so much fear, and we didn't know how well our assets would fare in that environment. But what we can tell you is that we had a 5% increase, so we did really well. So with all of those indicators in mind, and with hitting a 73% agreement rate when the threshold was 75%, we thought we would come back to Whānau and have another go at it and get an opinion from the Whānau as to whether we want to grow at pace, or if do we still need to be conservative in an environment where we are actually doing really well. And so this is about putting it back to the Whānau with a little bit more information, timely information, knowing that we came through COVID successfully. And so maybe the risk appetite is a little bit higher now. And that's why we've come back.
If I could add to that, I mean, the reality is we do have an ambitious program. We want to buy more of the land at Orake, the Orake block, the heartland of the heartland. And, you know, the blocks of land on Kupe Street are not cheap. I mean, we could be buying 5 farms in the Kaipara with some of that kind of money, but, you know, our vision is to buy back as much of the Orake block as we can, that the government is selling, so that we can consolidate our village up there. And the reality, and, you know, as I mentioned before, we've got the development programs at Whānau, at UniTech. We want to build more houses for Whānau. We have over 100 on the waiting list. I mean, and then we haven't even advertised the waiting list. So we know there are hundreds more out there, especially with everything the hapu's achieved in the last, well, mai rano, but in recent times, more and more whānau want to come back and live up there. You know, so it costs a lot of money. The reality is, although we have a big balance sheet, we don't have a lot of headroom with it set at 30% LVR. We're just below 20% now. We don't really want to go too far over 20% because we want to have a bit of headroom in case there is another shock that affects us. We don't want to be selling stressed land assets into a buyer's market. You know, so that's why we want to keep that buffer. But the reality is we don't have a huge headroom at the moment. I mean, of course, it's big compared to, you know, we go back home to Rewiti, up to Poto, of course. But, you know, when we're buying back $17, $20 million blocks of land on Kupe Street, and then wanting to build 30, 40 houses, you know, it costs another 20, 30 million. It all adds up. So, you know, that's another reason why we want to get more headroom, to give us more options, so we can deliver more for fun.
You mentioned stress land asset. Can you just elaborate a little bit on that for our whānau at home?
Oh, so selling an asset, a stressed asset into a buyer's market, all I'm referring to is probably what we thought was going to happen at COVID, potentially, where people would be offloading assets because they wanted to control their debt, etc. And if a lot of people are doing that all at the same time, then the prices are, you know, it's a buyer's market coming down lower. So we don't really want to be in that kind of position. Which is why we want to keep a buffer. If we're at 30 now, we're only borrowed up to about just below 20 at the moment. And we'll only ever go around 21, 22 maybe. So we go to 40, we're actually going to borrow up to around 30, maybe 33, 34.
No, killed it. Last week we sent out a special e-pānui, and inside that we asked for whānau to ask some pātai. Nō reira, whānau, we heard you, and we're going to throw it at the people who we think are best fit. So some of the questions that came through, and I'm going to read through a couple of these, is there were some questions around what is the difference between SGM and AGM. So Jamie, ka huri ki a koe, I'm going to bring this pātai over to you. Why do we need an SGM rather than wait for the AGM later in the year?
It's a good pātai, and it's really about protection. So a special, any changes to our trust deed require a passing of a special resolution. And that's a special resolution has a specific meaning in our trust deed. It has more higher barriers to overcome for it to pass. For instance, we have to get the 75% majority. We have to have 100 whānau present at the hui to make it a quorum. So it sets a very high bar. So there are only certain things that require a special resolution. One of those being any changes to our trust deed. What we are proposing here, similar to last year, is a change to our trust deed. So we have to do that by special resolution, and special resolutions can only be passed at a special general meeting. So it's very specifically laid out in our trust deed. Whereas at our AGM, our ordinary resolutions there get passed by a 50% majority. So it's a lower hurdle. So it is really about making sure that that the integrity of the trust deed is not compromised by being able to easily change or more easily change those important elements that keep us all protected.
And if I reflect back to 2010, we were constructing this new post-settlement governance entity. These were some of the discussions that the trustees of that era were having. I kind of think with these special general meeting take and kaupapa are big ones. The kaupapa nui, like James said, the threshold's high, 75%, and it's kind of like they're there to save us from ourselves. So we've actually got to think about it deeply as a leadership group, get independent views on it, and engage with the whānau so that the whānau understand what they are being asked to approve or not approve. And ultimately, it's not the elected rep's decision. It's in the whānau's hands. And we hope that the whānau will trust our advice and that we have their best interests in hand, and will support the LVR uplift.
We go to whānau, pātai tuatahi, ka huri ki te pātai tuarua. So moving on to the next pātai, ka whiua tēnei pātai ki Ngarimu. What exactly is the LVR lift going to buy?
Well, it gives us options, right? But we've already signalled, and the whānau have signalled to us that they would like things like more housing. So everyone knows pretty well now that housing costs a hell of a lot of money to construct, even the most basic of houses. And so, we have our Papakainga master plan, which process, which will be coming to whānau over winter which will finally, I think, lay out a program of building. Whānau can see the kaumātua housing now being built. I mean, that's over $5 million, that development itself. And we're always looking for opportunities as well if land comes up with my whairawa hat on. And as I mentioned before, we will want to acquire land out at Unitec, which is our right through our RFA treaty settlement. But we need to keep funding all of the things that Whaimaya are doing. They have their own ambitious plans as well, and rightly so, around our arts, around our reo, and also developing out Paurewa and so on. We have to keep paying for our NIB insurance, all of that. So we always hear about the sports club. Whānau want us to have an HQ back home. So there's so many, and this is the great thing. We've got these wonderful problems to solve, but the uplift in the LVR will just provide us with more options, and will help us manage that risk if there is another big catastrophe that happens, a worldwide shutdown or whatever, that we do have some headroom, that we don't have to then start offloading land when we're not ready to sell land.
And if we think about land that is being purchased or larger purchases, then how are we going to go about notifying whānau and consulting with whānau?
In terms of land purchasing more blocks?
Yes, or large purchases that are sort of being planned in the future.
Yeah. So I think we've got a general direction from whānau to acquire land, but you're right, there is a balance around all of this. For instance, we could look at the Orake block. If we bought up, there's another 340 properties that the government own there. I mean, that's 340 million, probably more, at least. Maybe it's 400 million. Yeah. So, and that's what we've got to think of as whānau. Well, we should be buying every block of land that Crown's selling at Orake. Well, that's 400 million. And that's either for land, with housing, or rundown houses, and then you got to fix those. So the numbers just keep keep going up and up. So that is something we do have to balance. Do we just keep buying land because it makes us feel good, or do we need to get more out of our land assets like it so we can get the dividend out the other end to give it over to the whaimaya and out to the kaumātua. So that's our ongoing challenge and thought processes that the trust has to go through.
Kia ora, kia ora. So thinking about the LVR lift, whānau have come back and asked, how is this going to benefit them individually and then us collectively? So kahuria kia precious, pehio whakaru.
I think I'll start off with the benefit collectively. So with an LVR uplift, what it gives us is access to money to create more wealth. And when we create more wealth, we can continue to deliver the amazing things that we already are delivering, like the care packs that we all received and that our parents and nannies received during lockdown. The fact that Steve was able to go into a rental vehicle and drive up and down the country to deliver those things to all whānau who really needed that level of aroha and that level of connection. So the LVR uplift helps us to continue to deliver those types of services. We are constantly told by our Māori friends in particular and Pākehā from throughout the motu about how amazing the universal health insurance through NIB is. And the LVR uplift helps us to continue to provide that service to whānau. And I don't know about you, but I've got new glasses, mum's got new eyes, a number of cousins with new knees and new hips. And so it's about continuing to deliver those things. What else it gives us the opportunity to do is to provide more of the things that whānau have requested of us. So as we've already mentioned, we developed a really aspirational strategy, and rightly so, which should be aspirational, but we can't pay for those things unless we have some access to capital to help us do that. I think some of the benefits that we will see from the LVR are probably going to be more experienced by our kids and by our mokopuna, because this is about long-term intergenerational wealth development, but at pace. So the LVR uplift allows us to create that gap, bring that gap closer in terms of the wealth that we need to be able to deliver all of the aspirations that our whānau have asked of us in a quicker time frame, hopefully so that we might benefit from it, but more importantly, our kids and our mokopuna benefit from it. And things like toi tupu, we can continue to deliver that and potentially increase it. And what we've seen, particularly during lockdown, is that there's a real need for access to the savings in toi tupu. And so we need to be able to respond to that and support our whānau when they need our help. And this LVR uplift is one of the mechanisms that we have at our avail to help us achieve that.
Kia ora, kia ora. Ka huri ki te pātai whakaputunga. So I'm going to throw out the last pātai from our whānau. This is to either of you who would like to answer, but what assets do we, Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei, own, and how do we find out about the trust projects?
So it's a good pātai, and I think this talks to the ongoing financial education we should be providing whānau about their own business. But broadly speaking, our investments and our assets are in property. In fact, the land we're sitting on right now is probably about half the value of our total asset book. And then we have a number of other property and land assets across central Tāmaki. I think it's probably timely that we provide whānau with a financial awareness seminar, if you like, or a financial update on working through the financial statements, looking at the assets that we do own and where they are, where they're situated, how we value them, how we protect them, so that whānau get a really good sense of that. They should understand, you should understand whānau, your business and the assets that you hold. In terms of projects for the trust, again, we publish every year our annual plan. And that really sets out our expectations for the year. And that's a really important document that whānau should look to and should hold us to account for, actually. So that will be coming out very soon for the next year. And I think that's a really good place for whānau to start to understand what types of things we want to be focusing on over the coming year.
Yeah, my whakaaro is just to kind of flip it on its head a little bit, not about assets that we own, but that the greatest assets are our whānau and our whakapapa. And so the LVR uplift allows us to support our whānau more quickly and more deeply and more strategically. And I guess it's just a final plug. We've tossed over this over a number of years and really encourage whānau to vote in support of the resolution to lift the LVR from 30% to 40%. It just gives us so much more freedom to continue to do amazing things, and it continues to allow us to be innovative in how we respond to whānau's needs. So no one else was doing health insurance for their whole iwi until we did it, and that was innovative of its time, but we've got more innovative ideas to support whānau as well. So encourage whānau to vote in support of the increase to 40%.
You have an ace of spades that you can trump these guys with.
Always.
All I'd say is the other thing too with an LVR uplift will help us think a little more around innovation, around the diversification of our asset base. So whilst we have invested well in really well located properties, and why wouldn't they be, because it's our home here. We love it here. So many other people do. They're valued really well. We have been thinking about this diversification journey for a few years now. We were going to head off on this tourism thing. Luckily, we didn't. But that is still in our minds as well, about how we can spread the risk a bit more around our asset base. Do we go into other areas? Jamie's leading a piece of work on behalf of the trust so that we start thinking about what are the other things we may invest in, whether that's clean technology, whether that's in the food sector, whether that's in, I don't know, movies, or I don't know, whatever it could be, but whatever it will be, will reflect our mātāpono, reflect our values, our culture, but it's all about creating more wealth, and I mean that in not just monetary terms, the ability to create more wealth for our generation now. We're trying to do as much as Chris as we can for our people now, not just 5 generations away or mokos, but also ensuring that we keep building it. So that our mokopuna have even more choices than what we have today.
Tēnā koutou, e ngā whatukura, e te maraikura. Thank you very much for enlightening us around LVR and also around the SGM and what's coming ahead. Mihi ana ki ngā amorangi ki mua, ka mihi tonu atu ki ngā hāpai o ki muri hoki. Nō reira, tēnā koutou. In the lead up to the SGM, we intend to engage whānau a lot more to explain further things around this kaupapa, around the LVR. So we've created a series of whānau hui, both online and kanohi ki te kanohi. So if we're able to have a look at it, should be up on your guys' screen right now. So we have today's webinar. Moving on from here, we have a bus tour, which is on May the 27th. 23rd, we're getting there. And then following on from that, we have the Taumata Hui, which is sitting on May the 25th. And then Whamiri i Tērā, we have the Rangatahi Hui, so that's our age 18 to 25 in the Auckland CBD, so that's also on the 25th. Following on, we have a whānau hui at the Ōrākei Marae on the 30th, between 11 to 12. Wednesday, we have Wednesday the 9th of June, we have another webinar, which will also be coming back with some questions if we were unable to answer them tonight. And then on Sunday, the 20th of June, starting at 11 a.m, we're going to hold the SGM at Ōrākei Marae via Zoom. Nō reira, me tai atu, hui topa, ipurangi rānei, so please, jump in online on that. But what I do want to do is, so definitely want you to come along to all those kaupapa as well. learn as much as you can around this kaupapa to get yourself informed so that you can make an informed decision when we get into the SGM. Now, thank you everyone. E mihi ana ki a koutou katoa, e mihi ana ki a koutou, e taku whānau, my whānau down the line there, e mihi ana ki a koutou. Ka mihi ake, we started with the karakia, nō reira, me mutu tō tātou nei hui I te karakia. Uni atu rā te pūtake o ngā kōrero I te wānanga, uni atu rā te hautapu o ngā riki. Kaupatiti e tāne te wānanga, ki rungi e nei taura, ki rungi e nei tau I rā. Kia koe te matapunenga mai, te matapui hoiho. Paki iri e rongo kia paita rā whare, te tuku whakamaua kia tīna, tīna, hui e, taiki e.